and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sara, and I am delighted that we have with us today Adrian M. Gibson, host of the other wonderful science fiction and fantasy podcast, SFF Addicts.
Hello. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
We've actually been hanging out all day because we just recorded an episode for SFF Addicts.
Behind the scenes.
So this is great. We're just rolling straight into another conversation. You're getting us like an hour into this whole process. It's going to be a good show.
Multiple drinks in already.
Oh, that's normal.
Even before recording, it's fine.
Well, Adrian, we like to start off things on a high note here. So what's something great that's happened recently?
My son started walking, which is both
That's
great
exciting.
and terrifying. It's so terrifying.
Oh, baby proofing has just gone up to another level, huh?
I mean, we baby-proofed before, but it's more like my level of attentiveness as a dad skyrocketed. It's like before I could reliably contain myself and him in like a play space and know that he's not going very far. But now that he's walking, it's pretty crazy. Because he just hits his head on stuff, and
Oh no.
yeah, he, like as much as I try to be careful, shit just goes awry every once in a while. You know, we even had to buy this thing for him that's like a little backpack with like a halo pillow that goes behind his head, so that if he falls back, at the very least, it cushions his head.
Mm-hmm.
But he's prone to fall in any direction. So.
So is the next step a helmet?
I don't know. He's getting the hang of it. He just started walking within the last week, so it's been a wild ride. And I feel like he's getting more experience, and so he's understanding what his limitations are.
Well, Sara, what's something great that's happened for you lately?
Something great that's happened for me lately is I got to do some gardening today. That was
Nice.
exciting.
What are you growing?
Well, it's more like weeds that are growing. So
what have you killed?
I was doing a lot of weeding today. Or not a lot. I only did like an hour of weeding. But it's an hour more of weeding that I've had a chance to do for like 3 weeks. So that was nice.
Do you have those like gardening knee pads?
I don't. I should get them though.
They're so good.
I have gardening jeans because I'm really hard on my jeans when I'm gardening, and they all have torn at the knee because I'm up and down and putting stress on that point.
So much vigorous friction on your knees.
Mm-hmm.
My mom taught me that gardening knee pads are a go-to.
Yeah, I think they would be great, especially when I'm gardening the strip that's like by concrete, because that's not pleasant to sit down on at all or kneel down on.
I just wad up an old towel. I didn't know they made a thing for that.
They make a thing for everything.
That's true. I should have known.
Yeah.
Well, Sara, you stole mine.
Oh no. I'm sorry. That was
okay.
unintentional.
Because I was planting things. I bought like 80 tulip and daffodil bulbs and planted those this weekend with my mother. And it's extra exciting because they're from the Tulip Festival just a little bit north of Seattle. So I've actually been to the place that grew the tulips. And I'm in the right location, so they're actually going to rebloom every year.
Oh, cool.
Unlike where I'm from in Southern California, you can plant tulips, but they only bloom once because it doesn't get cold enough.
Mm-hmm. Because tulips are weird like that.
They're weird like that, yeah. But I guess you have to have some benefit of this awful coldness. So, tulips.
Just overcast gray all the time.
Yes.
So lovely.
Alrighty, so what's everyone drinking tonight?
I'm drinking a fine Ecuadorian beer. I can say this in Spanish if anyone listening speaks Spanish.
Please do.
Y la mejor cerveza de Ecuador, que es Club, que sabe, okay, no es tan buena, pero no me gusta, está bien. Yeah, it's a decent beer. It's not terrible.
Nothing to write home about?
No. It's like fresh, hits the spot. It's a nice beer for a Saturday night. But it's not the kind of beer that you go to for, the highlights or anything like that. It's not like an IPA or a dark lager. It's like No, it is. And that's good. So that's my club. Lily, Sarah, what are you two drinking?
So I'm drinking cider, which is not unusual, but what is unusual is that it is actually a Washington cider. Because normally I stick with California cider, but this is Finn River, which is delightful.
Oh, love Finn River.
I know.
But hey, Washington has some really nice apples.
They do. I mean, their cider their cider is quite good. I like to stick with something a little more local. So usually my cider of choice is Blindwood cider, which is brewed right close to me, and the owners are wonderful and hand delivered all of their cider, and I love them to pieces.
That sounds amazing.
They're wonderful. Like they're adorable. They're great.
I'm drinking a dark and stormy because it is dark and stormy. I make that joke every time, but it's still good. I'm not sorry.
Is your mood also dark and stormy?
Never during recordings.
Never.
How can it be dark and stormy when you're here with us, Adrian?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mostly it's a lot of whiskey with some ginger ale and lime juice.
Sounds awesome, though.
It's very good.
The way it should be.
I didn't spring for the good ginger beer, which has actual ginger in it, which is the best way to make it, but also money.
I think last time you had a dark and stormy on the podcast, I mentioned that I have a recipe for homemade ginger beer, and I really should get that to you.
You really should. This time I actually sliced a real lime for it instead of using one of those awful squeezy bottles, so I feel like I'm on my way up.
No, the squeezy bottles are sacrilege. I can't believe you would even...
Well, it was that or no lime.
If it's a last resort, then yeah, sure. But...
Yeah.
Is it like the shitty little bottles that are shaped like a lime?
Yeah.
It's just like a fake lime with some some vat lime juice inside.
Yeah, they don't taste good.
It's been sitting there for a while.
Yeah. That hint of plastic from the bottle.
Oh, it just seeps in. Gives it that extra kick.
But I actually sliced a lime today, so basically I'm a
mixologist.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we should probably talk about books at some point.
It's been a while, but yeah.
I was going to say, read anything good lately, but our entire topic today is read anything good this year? Although I know the answer is yes. So maybe like a quick overview of current reads, and then we can dive into our highlights of the last year of reading.
So I am reading, we have 4 books that we need to read for the podcast before
That's my answer too.
Next Saturday. So that's what I'm reading. I think by the time that this episode is released, you will have already heard us talk about all 4 of them. But I'm reading Reaper Man by Terry Pratchett, The Salvage Crew by Yudunjaya Wijeratne. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I haven't had a chance to see if I can find him pronouncing it on the internet. And then Hogfather by Terry Pratchett, and The Vinyl Detective Low Action by Andrew Cartmel.
Yeah, we kind of fucked ourselves on the scheduling, huh?
Yeah, that was not all of that is our fault, but it was not our brightest moment at all.
But there's 2 Terry Pratchett books in there. It's like you can't go wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah, that'll be okay. And The Salvage Crew is only like 290 pages or so. So it's not that long.
And Terry Pratchett reads fast.
Terry Pratchett does read fast. And these are both rereads. Yeah.
Actually, I got those like really nice hardcover editions of Terry Pratchett.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the publisher is. I want to say Gallant, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure because it's the UK editions that you have. Reaper Man is like a yellow hardcover.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, but I don't know who publishes them.
But they're so beautiful. It's like
I
got Mort, Guards, and Small Gods.
Mm.
And I loved Mort so much. I'm just like, yeah, I'm gonna buy all of the Death books.
Yeah.
As you should.
And Hogfather, I think, is that the Christmas themed one?
It is.
Yeah. So that's good timing.
And Adrian, have you been reading anything good lately? That's not. I guess that's unrelated from your answers for the rest of the podcast.
I mean, it's difficult because like everything the last like 5 books that I've read were just amazing, bangers if you want to call them that, And so a lot of them are on my best of 2021, but yeah, no, I got to save everything for my best of. Like literally everything that I've been reading recently has just been like, wow, that was really good. That was really good too. Oh my God.
That's always nice when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. But then other than that, I mentioned my son earlier, but I've got a book that's a series called The New Father. And it just gives you advice and things to think about during certain periods of your child's life. So there's one that's the expectant father before you have a kid. And then there's the first year. And now I'm on 12 to 36 months. But I don't like skip ahead. I usually read it. So it's like he just turned 15 months today. And I read the 15 to 18 month chapter like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I have a little bit of heads up and an idea of what to expect. And then some things are just like, he's already done that. And I'm like terrified, but.
Yeah. So have you found that it's like, maybe accurate's not the right word, but have you noticed that it's pretty spot on overall?
Yeah, because the author has, I think, 3 or 4 kids. The author's Armin Brott. I think that's his name. But then he also did interviews for each book with like hundreds of fathers.
Oh, that's great.
So, and then his citations are just like through the roof with pediatricians and kid psychologists and different things like that. So
this year has been a hell of a year.
Although, it's been a year.
Out of the last couple, maybe not the most crazy. Maybe my meter is just off now.
It's like snowball effect crazy.
Yeah.
It's just been exponential. That's it.
I was going to say, I feel like we don't have new crazy. We're just dealing with the old crazy.
There is new crazy for sure. But I feel like it doesn't seem as crazy mixed up in all the craziness that has come before.
But there sure were some great books that I read and that came out, but mostly that I read because that's what I care about.
So selfish.
Yeah, it's my podcast. I'm going to start mine with 2 honorable mentions because they were on my list of favorite books and therefore do not count, even though I reread them this year. Which were Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons and A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which I did not write the author's name down for, but that's fine.
Becky Chambers.
Thank you.
I feel like you should know this if it's one of your favorite books of all time.
I haven't even read the whole series. I just love that book. I don't care.
Still.
There's like 4 books in a novella or something like that. There's so much.
Yeah, but I bet they're all good. I can only speak for the first one. I reread both of those. I forced Sara to read both of those. Very different books, but I do love them. And I don't reread a lot, so getting to reread those was really nice.
And you can go and listen to our episodes on both of those, should you be so inclined.
Good segue.
I do my best.
Adrian, what about you? Do you have any books that you're like, I loved this one, but I don't necessarily need to talk about it for an hour?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. So there's one author that I read this year, Alison Stein, and her first book, Road Out of Winter, was great. Not stellar, but like really solid. And then her next book, Trashlands, which came out last month.
I love that title.
Amazing book. Really, really good. So it's kind of like Road Out of Winter was a good introduction. Great. And then Trashlands just went up into my top 10 for this year. So, but Road Out of Winter is awesome. Basically boils down to like a post-climate apocalypse type deal where winter just stays and spring never comes.
Interesting.
I'm trying to decide if I want to read that in the middle of winter or if that would be too much for me.
I read it in the middle of June here in Ecuador. And so I was like, I need something that's like very different, polar opposite, pun intended, haha, of Ecuador heat. And I read Road Out of Winter and I was like, yeah.
I want to be cold.
Yeah, it's like, this reminds me of growing up in Canada and it's great. But the best part of it is that it's very character driven. It's kind of like found family type deal. But the main character is a weed farmer, which was awesome.
I love that.
Yeah. And so that book was great, but it's not like, holy shit, I need to scream about it to the world.
Yeah.
Trashlands is more on that level. So I
Cool.
think that's the one that really stands out to me from this year. Because it was like, I had a few, I would say like 3 stars, and then a couple of 4 stars, and then just like a lot of 5-star, really solid books that I've read this year. So like, I don't know how I just cajoled my way into reading such awesome stuff. Yeah.
Sarah, how about you? Do you have any quick honorable mentions?
So honorable mentions, well, of course, honorable mention has to go to Good Omens and Night Watch. Good Omens, we reread because we had an episode on it. Night Watch, I reread because I reread it every year on May 25th. And then also, I would say honorable mention goes to Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki, only because I have another of her books in my top books for this year, and I didn't want to have duplicate authors. But Light from Uncommon Stars came out in September or October of this year. I don't remember when exactly. And it follows the story of 3 women who kind of come together in LA. There's trans violin prodigy, a woman who, a violin teacher who has sold her soul to the devil.
What is it about violin that just makes people need to play it so well?
I don't know. And then there's an alien donut shop owner, and I mean alien as in she is literally from an alien planet. And it's just this really compelling, poignant story that I would recommend people read. But I'm not going to talk at length about it because that's this is the honorable mentions. I'm not supposed to. So
It does sound very cool, though.
yeah, it was a great book. I think Rika Aoki is a really fantastic writer. And this book made me hungry. Like, there was a lot of description about really good sounding Asian food in LA and like donuts. And I was like, I want some of that.
I feel like we should have a section for work that we loved that was written by a friend. Because they're very good work. But yeah, also, like, friends with the author.
Connor Kaplan.
and Crystal Matar.
Yeah, right? I was like, 'cause I have, we have these people. I'm going to specifically say The Cabbie by K.R.R. Lockhaven, which is a short story he wrote that is heartbreaking. Speaking of like family dynamic stories, his like parent-child relationships are just absolutely so bittersweet. They make me cry every time.
He does a really good job writing about that dynamic.
And The Cabbie is a short story that is specifically focused on that and very, very good. We spoke about The Sword in the Street very quickly because we just did an episode with Connor, but the people listening to this don't know that. So I feel like we should actually say what it is.
It's a time warp.
Okay, it's kind of Dickensian fantasy. You have these 2 characters, one of whom is a scholar and one of whom is swordsman, a hired swordsman, and they have a lovely relationship, but they have issues talking to each other, and that causes conflict. And Connor is very good at describing that and the repercussions of that and how it all plays out, and it's a very good book.
And the cover is done by Felix Ortiz, and it's very good.
Yes.
And if you ever talk to Connor about it, make a dagger in the sheets joke. And tell him Lily sent you. I am only halfway through The Mare Cycle by Dan Fitzgerald. So I have finished one book, but I have decided that trilogy should be considered a single book. And so I'm not saying I read the whole thing this year. Maybe that's splitting hairs, but I really do feel like it is going to be one full story just based on how the first 2 books have gone so far.
Mm-hmm.
But if I had read it in time, it would be on this list.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy thing. Like, I joined Fanfi Addict in May, and yeah, it's like meeting all these different people on Twitter and then meeting authors and then becoming friends with authors, or at least becoming acquaintances and becoming friendly with them. And just being like, oh my God, I have so much stuff to read. You know? It's like, Jonathan Navarre and Crystal Matar and Dan Fitzgerald and Connor And I don't know if you two have chatted with Peter Hartog.
Yeah.
Point.
Mm-hmm.
So Peter and I have become friends, and we do like a bi-weekly, every 2 weeks, writing critique session with each other. It's this beautiful friendship that we've developed, but at the same time, I'm just like, I have your books ordered and they're coming, and I just like, I need to read them because I'm critiquing your third book, but I haven't read the first two.
His books sound fantastic. I haven't read them. I think I have them both on my Kindle, and everything that I've seen about them have just raved about how good they are.
Another friend is Dan Stout, and his books Titan Shade and the sequels Titan's Day and Titan Song are fantastic. Really, really good. Sort of like secondary world detective thrillers.
Ooh, I do love mysteries.
With weird alien creatures. And it's
even
awesome.
Better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I want to check that out.
Yeah, and the covers are fantastic.
And then, of course, we have to talk about Legacy of the Brightwash. Adrian, I know you haven't read that yet. You really have to.
It's like, I got the copy. It's coming. It's coming, man.
Yeah. Crystal does such a good job at writing these compelling characters who they're making bad decisions, but you know why they're making them. And you just, like, you want to see what's going to happen next. And there's a mystery, and this really grim kind of world is great.
And Crystal's just awesome.
And Crystal is just awesome.
I absolutely loved Smuggler's Fortune by Angela Board. Maybe I'm a little biased, though, because I have said, like, I want to read more shorter works. And this is, well, I'm holding my hands up, which isn't helpful. But it's a much smaller book compared to Angela's and Crystal's other works.
Yeah, I didn't realize how long Crystal's book was until it arrived at my house. I'm like, oh shit, this is like 650 pages.
Yeah, it's I think it's like 220,000 words. It's chonky.
It's chonky.
Yeah.
And I have seen her refer to it as her chonky boy, so I don't know why I was so surprised.
Mm-hmm.
There's no filler in it, though.
Yeah.
There, like, a lot happens. I roll my eyes at mega long fantasy novels, but that one doesn't count.
Well, I mean, there's a difference between books, fantasy novels that are super long because you feel like the author is just trying to fill up pages, and long because you think that the story actually needs those pages.
Yeah.
And Legacy of the Brightwash, I think, is definitely the latter.
I agree.
Yeah, where it's just like the world and the characters necessitate the space. And it's not like the pacing suffers at all for it.
And then, of course, we have my bard alter ego who showed up in The Part About the Dragon Was Mostly True.
Yes, that book was delightful. I think, as I believe I said when we were actually talking about it in the episode, if you liked Kings of the Wild, you would probably like this. It's a similarly, I mean, there's not so much the music references that you get in Kings of the Wild, but it's a similarly kind of irreverent look at D&D inspired fantasy with a lot of great characters, lots of poop jokes, and bad puns.
That sounds like a beautiful combination, though.
It's great.
Fantastic. And a great example of an unreliable narrator.
Yes. Yeah, Heloise is not reliable in the least. But that's part of what makes it fun.
We could do this by category, but we didn't predetermine any categories. I could say... Nope, I couldn't say that either. Yeah, we don't have any categories. I'm just going to go.
Just go for it.
We're going to talk about Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia next, because holy shit, I loved that book. I can't talk about it too much because so much of the enjoyment comes from sort of discovering what happens. But, I mean, the title almost says it all. It's Mexican Gothic. I do have... Oh, no. Is my trope for that a spoiler? Maybe I can't talk about it when we talk about tropes. Damn.
Oops.
Well, there's a trope in it that it does really good. Go read it.
It does it real good.
Real good. Adrian, what's a book that you loved this year?
Well, actually, just a quick thing since you brought up Silvia Moreno Garcia. Honorable mention, Gods of Jade and Shadow.
Ooh, I really want to
heard of
read that
book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really great book. Just fascinating. Yeah. I mean, piggybacking off of the episode that we recorded for SFF Addicts, I've got a thing for mythology, apparently. And I really like that book because it's all about Mayan and Aztec mythology.
Have you read Aliette de Bodard?
Not yet.
Because, oh gosh, what was the title of
Servant of the Underworld?
Yeah, Servant of the Underworld, I think would fit that category for you.
Nice. Yeah, I'm just like all over that stuff. And I guess Black Sun by Rebecca Brownhorse also is one of my best books of this year and fits perfectly into that. Just a fantastic secondary world inspired by Mesoamerican history and mythology, mixed in with a little bit of indigenous cultures from the southern United States. And I just loved it. It's because it was centered around characters that I cared for. And the way that their stories converged while at the same time giving just the right amount of world building and sort of like relationship depth and cultural nuance was very well done. And there's also seafaring in there, and I love seafaring. And all the little twists just hit at the right moments. And by the end, I was fully invested in the characters. I had a real vivid imagery in my head of what this world was like. And then by the end, I was just like destroyed because some shit happens. And you weren't expecting that, were you?
I mean, don't all of the best books destroy you in some way?
Yeah. But it destroyed me so well. Yeah. I just closed that last page and I was like, fuck. But I loved it. And that to me is the sign of a good story. It's like, you slapped me in the face, but I appreciated it.
But then call me pretty after.
Yeah, it's like some weird like fictional kink, but it worked. Yeah. So Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse is excellent book.
If you like getting slapped in the face.
Yeah. In a kinky way. Yeah.
So I think technically we have different books in the series on our list. Lily has book 1 in the series and I have book 2.
It's because I haven't read book 2 yet.
Yes. But The Phoenix Feather is a series by Sherwood Smith. It is based on Chinese wuxia, like cultivation fantasy. And this was her pandemic project. So she's been just writing what she wants to write and seeing where it goes. And book 1 was a lot of fun. I think book 2 takes all of those threads and like ratchets it up and is even better. And
book
it ends
1 was already on my list. So I think it only pales in comparison to itself.
Well, yes. It ends on such a cliffhanger. Book 2 ends on such a cliffhanger. I'm like, oh my God, why do I have to wait? I mean, I guess, okay, technically I don't have to wait because she's posting the chapters on her Patreon. But
I wouldn't be able to read it one chapter at a time.
I'm
miserable.
Yeah, I am a patron of hers, but I'm waiting because I think that's just, it's a format, reading on Patreon is a format that doesn't work for me, so I'm waiting to read it when it's actually published, which luckily I don't have to wait that long. I think book 2 came out in October, around there, September, and book 3 comes out in January, so not long after this episode airs, and I'm very excited.
I think she said she's written like 5.
I think she's working on book 4 or like nearing the end of book 4. But yeah, she's just writing these and seeing where they go. And it's really working out.
On the actually interesting cultures that haven't been beaten to death vein, A Master of Gin by P. Jelly Clark was also fantastic.
Yes.
Oh my God.
And I want to take a minute to plug, Adrian, you had an episode where you interviewed him and talked about, among other things, A Master of Gin. And it was a really great episode. So listeners, you should go and listen to that.
Yeah, that's a 2-part interview. And it's also available on YouTube if anyone wants to see my face.
Highly encouraged. That jawline, gonna make the podcast better.
Hot damn. Speaking of kinks.
Speaking of, though, the suits in A Master of Gin. Holy shit.
So
Just
good.
read that book for the fashion alone.
Yeah.
I mean, don't, because it's also a great book.
Fatma's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And the world building, that is on my top 10 as well, because it's just so good. So good. It's like world building, yes. Characters, yes. Gin and magic and fucked up creatures and things dying and all kinds of cool stuff, yes. But also like a well done mystery.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where the villain or like the supposed bad guy is revealed at the beginning, but then it's just like, no, man, I'm just gonna like, stick a knife in your gut and just like twist. Just,
Adrian likes books that are violent to him psychologically.
Clearly.
I'm a dad. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I don't get enough of this in the room.
Well, we're always here to talk about weird book stuff with you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. But actually, on the note of P. Jelly Clark, Ring Shout, I also read it this year, and that book is phenomenal.
I almost added
so
Ring
good.
Shout to my list of books that I wanted to read next year
Please do it.
for the SFF ad. I mean, I own it. Like, I intend
It's
to
short
read it.
too. It's
Yeah.
not that long. Yeah, and it's like Ku Klux Klan.
Those fucks. It's fine.
Yeah.
Those fucking KKK reimagined as literal monsters, and I've never looked at a butcher shop in the same way as I have since
I have so
read
many
that book.
questions now.
Yeah.
I know.
But it's beautiful. It's like KKK monster hunters, and I love it. I love it.
I absolutely adore the premise.
Well, I can see Sarah's list. So I know what books I could like make a segue for. But Adrian, I can't see your list, so I don't know how to give you a segue. So why don't you just take it? Here's your segue.
That's totally good. Thank you. I gotta say Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky.
Oh, that sounds so good.
That book gave me chills. It was like 600 pages that felt like generations in the best possible way. The pacing was really well done, and I didn't ever get to a point where I was in a slog. But the book literally spans generations, and you get dual perspectives of humans on a generation ship and a planet that has been purposefully uplifted with a virus that was meant to be for chimpanzees who would later become humans, but the chimpanzees died in orbit. And instead, it's a race of spiders that end up becoming sentient. And it is like
Oh my god.
coolest, like the absolute coolest representation of arachnids and biology I've ever seen on the page.
Adrian Tchaikovsky is one of those authors that I haven't read yet. I wasn't familiar with him before we started this podcast, but I'm like, I need to read some of his work.
Yeah. It's like
That wasn't even the pitch you gave before we started recording, but both pitches make me want to read it, and that's not fair.
It's so good though. It's so good. And like I have not looked at spiders in the same way, you know. Because like we have spiders around my house and stuff like that, and I'll just look at them and think like, oh man, you're just like there's a civilization waiting for you, you know. There's so much in your future. That it's like I can't bring myself to kill a spider. It's like I have hope for you, you know? Get uplifted. So yeah, that book blew me away. And you know, I've read other books by Adrian Tchaikovsky, but that one just sunk into me. It's like I couldn't read anything for like a few days after that.
Oh wow.
It's one of those kinds of books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another book that was like that for me, but is on Sarah's list, it was Gigantic by Ashley Stokes. Sarah, go!
Yeah. So Gigantic by Ashley Stokes is a book that I put on here because it's one of those books where you can't stop thinking about it after you've read it. Like it lingers in your head. And it's about a Bigfoot hunter in the UK, and there's really this question of, well, is he actually, like, does Bigfoot actually exist? Or Gigantopithecus, I believe, is the actual cryptid that they're looking for.
How did you
and
remember
there are all kinds
that?
of, like...
I had that word up on my screen during the episode we recorded. Every time I had to say it, I was, like, sounding it out.
I keep random things in my memory, not useful things.
Damn, girl.
Gigantopithecus, it's like, boom, I got this shit.
Gigantopithecus. And there are all sorts of, like, family dynamics at play, and the character work and how it intersects with the plot is just masterful.
It's another example of...
unreliable narrator.
Thank you, yes.
Yes.
We get the story from two perspectives. One is the main character, and then one is, I'm not going to call her the antagonist, but another Bigfoot hunter who has a more scientific approach versus the main character who is a very faith-based approach. And so we're seeing the same events from their two different reports.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost, it's an epistolary, right? Like they're writing the accounts down.
Yeah, I think this is also a great example of a novel that plays with format, because these written reports of the GITS? Is it GITS? Gigantopithecus? Yeah.
Investigative team or something.
Yeah. But the reports of this team play such an integral part to how the reader sees the story play out.
I mean, that sounds fascinating. Coming from the Pacific Northwest, I'm like, yeah, that appeals to me, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I knew people who were just like I know Bigfoot's real. I'm like, okay, yeah.
That's part of the absurdity is, right, like, living in the Pacific Northwest, I can understand, like, of course something lives in that forest. I don't put it past them for believing in it. But this takes place in, like, very dense England.
Yeah, which is funny because England, I don't think there are any old growth forests left in England. It's essentially it's essentially like converted. Yeah, it's like converted to agricultural land, or it's forest that was destroyed to make ships and buildings and whatever the old Anglos needed to make their civilization a thing, and then replanted forests. So it's like, no, Bigfoot would have died, man, a long time ago.
That's the beautiful tragedy of this book, is the main character is convinced that Bigfoot is still there, was always there, and is still there. And it was definitely one I also had to put down at the end. I just, like, laid there with my eyes closed thinking about it. Like,
yeah,
fuck.
It lingers. And, like, that ending, too. That ending lingers.
Mommy, I'll say a sentence about it. We'll try to splice that together. It'll be fun.
Okay.
Or we could just admit that there was a power
outage.
I was going to say technical issue, but yeah, actual power outage. So whatever Sara said last about epistolary formats.
Yeah, so she mentioned that at some point about Gigantic. And on that note, this is how you lose the time war. Uses form and epistolary technique very well. And I actually just finished that this morning, and it just shot up my list. Something that I really, really loved. With two time-traveling secret agent type people who are fighting a time war. There's like a time war between two organizations, more or less. And they send their agents across time to, like, pull little strings and manipulate history in such a way that they can beat each other. But there's like a back and forth with letters that these two agents are leaving for each other, basically telling one another how much they screwed each other over. And it's awesome.
That sounds delightful.
I loved it so much. But the best thing about the book is just the rich language. So it's co-written by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Motar. And just the prose is beautiful. It's so descriptive, and the metaphor and everything. I think Amal has done a lot of poetry in her career, and that shows here for sure, because just the poetic description is unbelievable. And I would just burn through a page and then be left with amazing imagery in my head. And it's only 200 pages. So I read it in a day. I started it yesterday and I finished it this morning. So yeah, I can't recommend that book enough.
I am all for short books that pack the kind of emotional punch that sounds like This Is How You Lose the Time War packs.
I'm just realizing I got that book confused with the book you were talking about earlier. But that's fine. They both sound good. Those are two different books, which makes a lot more sense.
The Adrian Tchaikovsky book.
Yeah, so you're saying there are not arachnids in This Is How You Lose the Time War.
No. I think there's like spider metaphors, but no explicit spiders.
All right. Mm-hmm. No philosophical arachnid race. No. Okay.
But both are very much worth your time. So
I think the next book on my list would be Hemelia Hilo by Rika Aoki. I mentioned that she had written Light from Uncommon Stars, and this is an earlier book of hers that's magical realism set in Hawaii. And it was like gigantic. This is one of those books that just you linger over it once you're finished reading. You just keep thinking about it. And it's kind of a slow book, very character driven and not super, super plot heavy. It's about a hula group that is putting on a hula dance based on the life of Jesus.
Should I not laugh at that? Is that not supposed to be funny? Now I feel bad.
It's supposed to be funny.
Okay.
But it really kind of encapsulated how I feel about Hawaii. I have some relatives who are there, and whenever I read it, I felt so deeply immersed. Like I felt like I was actually in Hawaii. And she just has a real talent for writing about food and people and the intersection between them.
Yeah, I mean, I love food and people, so it's a great combination.
This is really dumb and probably not going to be in the podcast, but I literally just made the connection between hula the dance and hula hoop the object.
Please keep that in the podcast.
Hula hoop has always just been one word in my head. Yeah, I just had that light bulb moment.
Bravo.
I'm sorry. I don't want to detract from the book. That sounds very, very good.
I feel like
I was over here having a crisis.
I feel like that's the kind of statement that Rika Aoki would appreciate.
Good. I'm glad.
She's one of those authors, incidentally, that I can never say just one part of her name. Like Neil Gaiman. I can't say Neil. I can't say Gaiman. It has to be Neil Gaiman. Mm-hmm. Rika Aoki just has to be Rika Aoki.
Well, it flows so nice when you say it. Adrian, do you have something good before I just devolve into romance fluffy garbage?
I can drop what is easily my best book of the year.
Oh,
do tell.
Do. Wait, drum roll. Pretend there's a drum roll happening. All right, go.
Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee.
I haven't read any of that trilogy yet.
It's so good.
But
the Greenbone Saga is just hands down one of my most favorite fantasy series of all time, because it hits on so many notes that I love, and I chatted with Fonda a week and a half ago, and I just kind of gushed on the reasons why. And it was an honor to speak with her. Honestly, it was so cool because she's such a big fan of gangster movies and Hong Kong martial arts action films and stuff like that. And I love the Godfather trilogy, also the books. And so this series essentially comes down to like, what if the Godfather, which is essentially an epic about a family more so than gangsters or criminals or anything like that. What if that took place in a secondary world inspired by Asia, like Hong Kong and Singapore and places like that, with magic and martial arts fueled by Jade? And it's really cool. And the action is amazing because Fonda herself is a black belt martial artist. So she knows what she's talking about, and she writes action super well, but also the character moments. These are some of the characters where it's like I connected with them so deeply. And there were moments in Jade Legacy where I was like, I don't cry that often, not in like a manly way or anything like that, but it's just like, it takes a lot for me to cry. And I was like on the verge of tears with so many moments in this book. And it brought the series to a close in such a beautiful way.
Okay, I guess that answers my question, because I was going to say, where in the trilogy does this book sit? But if it brings the series to a close, it has to be the third one.
This is book 3 in the trilogy, and I really love it because every consecutive book. So Jade City is very tightly focused on a city, the capital of this fictional island, and then Jade War, which is the second book, expands that and kind of brings in some international elements, and then book 3 expands that even further, but the main narrative technique is time, and so it takes place over about like 30 years of this family and their clan and how they're expanding and all these different political machinations that are going on, but also all the family drama that's happening too, where it's like between siblings and between parents and children. And I just connected with these characters so much, even though they're not technically good people. There's a lot of bad shit that they do, but it's the kind of situation where I can justifiably understand why they made the decisions that they made.
I am on the record for saying I love organized crime. So
you need to read this. Yeah.
Sounds like a book for me. Yeah.
It's awesome. Like, it's so cool because there's, really sweet, tender moments between characters, but then there's also like political assassinations and gang warfare and, duels. Like, there's just like Jade. They have these, I think they're called Talon knives, like with Jade in the hilt and stuff like that. And they have duels because that's part of their culture. I'm like, fuck yeah. It's kind of old school, but it works and it's really cool. So yeah, everything about the series, love it. And this last book was just better than the 2 that came before it and solidified this trilogy as something I'll always look back on fondly.
I'm going to bring up this next book because I know all 3 of us have read it, which is All Systems Red by Martha Wells, which is the first in the Murderbot series. I've only read that one, but holy shit, I would love to read the rest of them because it is so good.
I bought the rest of them and I intended to read them, and then I didn't have the time to read them.
And then we schedule 4 books in 1 week.
Yeah.
That's on you.
Poor planning on our part. Yeah. Well, I'd say 90% is on 10% is not on us.
But that series is so amazing. Like, I've read up until book 4, and I mentioned to you both in the podcast that we recorded before this about how it was kind of like a palate cleanser for me. Mm-hmm. It's like anytime I needed a bit of levity and sarcasm, I could always rely on Murderbot, and it was just a beautiful escape.
I think that's the best way to describe it, because it is like, it's not all puppies and rainbows. It's called Murderbot for a reason, but it is so removed from anything. I don't know. We're reading a lot of Terry Pratchett right now, which has like some extremely stressful parallels with the real world. And sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes you just want a murderous robot on another planet.
But a sympathetic robot who is learning to understand people. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like, if you read more of the series, Lily, you'll come to understand that it's like, so much of what Murderbot thought they understood about people came from futuristic soap operas. But
right, we get that a little bit in the first book.
That comes up more and more. But then you get the sort of contrast and parallels between what Murderbot sees in soap operas and what they experience in the real world. And I think that is kind of like the heart of it.
Just the first book was incredible, and knowing that it just is like stays that good is not all I need. I also need to read them, but it goes a long way.
Just knowing is enough. I don't need to read it.
It's out there for someone. Are they all about the same length? Because Murderbot is very short.
There's one full-length novel.
Book 5.
I should say All Systems Red is very short.
The first 4 and then the 6th one are all within like
novellas
100 to 150 pages, more or less, 160. And then book 5, I think, is a full length. But even then, it's like 250 pages or something like that. Which is why I love novellas, because you can just, in between some fucking beast of a Sanderson book or something, you can just read Murderbot and be done with it in like a couple of days and really satisfied.
I also think there's a lot more room for experimentation in a novella, because if it gets really weird, it's only for a short period of time. So if something would grate on you eventually, like the story can end before then. So there's just a lot more room for just like trying stuff.
And in the case of Murderbot, it is a continuous story. So it's like where one novella ends, the next one picks up pretty much immediately after. But it doesn't feel like there's so much pressure with each of them. It's like, okay, I finished that story. I'm satisfied. I will keep reading because I love this character. And it is mostly about the character.
Yeah.
So. But then it doesn't have like the pressure that big novels and series and trilogies, what have you. That kind of stuff is just sometimes I like The Wheel of Time. I read book 1 this year and really enjoyed it. I have some issues with it, but it weighs on me how long that series is with all the other stuff that I want to read.
I mean, The Wheel of Time is a commitment.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, it's a big commitment.
That's the math I do. How many Murderbots could I read for one Wheel of Time book, and which one would I rather do? 8 Murderbots? Obviously that.
You could read the whole Murderbot series in the space of a Wheel of Time book.
Yeah, like how is that even a question?
It's like, sorry, Mr. Jordan, it's too much. It's too much.
Oh, I'm not sorry.
That's why you're just gonna watch the TV show, and that's it.
Yeah. That's all I got in me for that whole situation.
Wheel of Time isn't for everyone, and that's okay.
It's also not on your list for the best books of the year, I noticed.
It's not, because there is a little too much non-consensual spanking to make it.
That's fair.
But I did really enjoy the series. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. It might not make my top 10.
I know. It's a good series. I'm giving you a hard time.
I know. As expected.
And who doesn't love a good little spank here and there?
Well, the problem
consensual.
Yeah. The problem is that it's non-consensual. Like, this is not spanking between consenting adults in a sort of like sexy
it's not
adult
for fun.
Yeah. It's used as punishment really weirdly. And there's a lot of it, and you really get the sense that Jordan had a thing for spanking, which is great. You do you, guy, but it shows up in his work in weird ways.
So strange.
It's very strange.
It's like, enough with the spanks, bud.
Yeah. Or at least have it be like in an intimate scene. Like, that would be fine.
Yeah,
but
like
instead it's
just like Rand and Egwene, just like, come on, baby. Thou must spank me.
I mean, that would be better. That would be better.
Yeah.
My understanding is you did something wrong, and so this is what you get now.
Yes.
Which is horrifying.
That's like old school parental child corporal punishment kind of shit.
Yeah, like that's not how two adults should be acting. Yeah.
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 But between adults, it's weird. I can't. That's not the reason why I'm not going to read the series. But
I'm just gonna bend you over my knee and give you a good spanking, sir.
I mean, that's basically what it's like.
The fuck? Oh my god.
That's what you're missing out on.
Yeah. So that's what you have to look forward to if you continue reading The Wheel of Time.
I'll make it through slowly. At least the TV show gives me this, like, one book a year is fine. Like, it takes the pressure off a little bit. And the TV show's probably going to curtail that spanking business, so.
I should hope so. I have high hopes in that regard. I'm hoping that, Rafe just cuts out all of the spanking content as being extraneous to the plot. They don't need it.
Speaking of spanking, my next 2 books are romance novels.
Nice. Good segue.
Not that there's any of that in there, because they're not that exciting of romance novels. But A Song of Blood and Stone by Elle Penelope and Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. 2 very different books with very different strengths, but I sure did love the relationships in both of them. That's why they're both on this list. A Song of Blood and Stone was not even a podcast book, and it's also like fucking ginormous.
We had talked about making it a podcast book,
but it's too long to reasonably read.
Well, no. This is one of the very early books that we had talked about. And it was a book that I wasn't necessarily going to read, so it was just going to be Lily who was talking about it. And then it kept getting pushed back so we could talk about other books because we realized that our initial plans were a little overambitious about how much we could actually fit into one episode. And so Blood and Stone got cut, sadly.
It was a very good book. Strong female main character, interesting relationship with her love interest, not all sunshine and rainbows. The pacing was a little, I don't want to say predictable, but they have their fight and then they come back. No one saw that coming. But this is on my list because I read this entire book in like 2 days.
Oh wow.
Not all at once. I started it on one day. And then several weeks later came back and just could not stop reading it. I stayed up way too late. I was very tired for work the next day, but it pulled me in and I could not put it down. And that's such a wonderful experience when you just get sucked into a book like that and so invested. And I know it's a series. If all the books are that long, I'm not going to finish the series. I'm sorry. You're a good writer. It's just a lot. But it was very good.
I have a romance novel as one of my top 10 as well, which is surprising given that I'm not a huge romance person. I know.
You're stepping on my brand.
I'm sorry. But The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton was just delightfully zany. This book was about these society women who commandeer their houses and fly them and pilot them as pirate ships all over England. And it's just such a wild concept. Very fun. There's a really steamy love interest. It was just great. I loved it.
Every time you describe that book, you add another detail, and I'm just like, and that!
Yeah. Like,
it's so good.
I really think you need to read it. I think you would just love it. It was the perfect, I think that I read it in between some like big, epic fantasy serious books. And it was kind of the perfect palate cleanser. It was just so much fun. And the characters are so entertaining and enjoyable. And it's a romp.
Well, I hope we have it on our list for next year. Otherwise, I'm never going to have time to read it, but I would like to.
I don't know if you have another top read for the year that you wanted to talk about, Adrian.
Claire North's Notes from the Burning Age.
I have never heard of that, but it sounds very cool.
Very good.
It has a really pretty cover. I remember seeing the cover and really liking it.
Sarah, you're not supposed to do that. There's literally sayings about not doing that.
Nah, I judge by covers all the time.
But that book is so good.
Yeah, and these days there are a lot of really good covers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can appreciate a good cover. That's fine. That's different.
Well, that's what I was doing.
But Notes from the Burning Age is, as the title suggests, the world burned, and it's kind of like an unspecified future point after humanity, through their hubris and everything, extracting natural resources and fossil fuels and just fucking up the world in general.
What? That's never happened before.
Humanity wouldn't do such a thing.
Nature kind of like fought back in the form of natural disasters to the point where so much of the world burned that humanity was left to scattered few who essentially rebuilt society from the remains of what came before. So that's basically just like the history of the book, but then the actual book itself plays with so many different elements, but it has this real cool Cold War spy thriller vibe to it, where the main character is part of like a holy temple, and his job was to scan and like look through old materials from the previous arrogant generation of humans and deem it, safe for use, safe for consumption, blah, 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 or it's too scandalous, too heretical, and needs to be contained and locked away. So certain things like schematics for bombs or fighter jets or tanks and stuff like that, but then also pornography and all these different kinds of things would be too heretical.
Oh yeah, because that's the same.
Of course. It's like an F-14 or like a dick. I don't know. But
murdering thousands of people with the press of a button or genitals. Yep.
But the way it all plays out is kind of like this game of subterfuge where there's a nation and an organization that want to more or less reclaim what came before. And then so many organizations and governments in the future are like, no, we have to be in tune with nature or else we're just going to get burned again. Literally. And the way it all plays out is so good because like the tension is just palpable throughout the whole novel. And there's this really interesting interplay between the protagonist and certain antagonistic characters that came out beautifully through dialogue and through character moments and all this kind of stuff. And all of that just interlaid with beautiful world building, really amazing prose, and just an atmosphere and the tension that I mentioned earlier, just commingling and just like kept me gripped throughout the whole thing, And then by the end, it's just like, holy shit, like so much stuff's happening, But, this character just goes through hell. And the ending is very satisfying. So I really recommend this book, especially for people who like Cold War spy thrillers, in the vein of like John le Carré, like Tinker Tailor's Soldier Spy kind of stuff. All that kind of Cold War era atmosphere, but in a very interesting future Earth with a fascinating, rich world building about how our generation destroyed the world, essentially.
I'm sorry, our generation? Ours?
The generation that came before us, compounded by our generation, compounded by the generation that comes after. Yeah.
No, I'm just being shitty. But, okay, I promise this
I don't want to get blamed for anything. I don't drive a car. Fuck you.
I drive an electric car, man.
Good for you.
I don't drive any sort of car.
Yeah, so you guys both have one up on me. I can't even be smug here. What's the point of driving an electric car if I can't be smug about it?
That's why everybody hates electric cars, is because the owners are smug. It's not even about the concept. It's just like some dick driving a Prius in Hollywood and being way too smug about it.
Okay, I promise this is not a trick question.
Okay.
Have you read a lot of apocalypse books, or are there a lot of apocalypse books to read? Because I'm sensing a trend.
I mean, yeah, I have. I mean, I took a course in university that was specifically called like post-apocalyptic landscapes, which was fascinating, really cool. And there's a part of me that's like, I like reading books in that setting or watching movies in that setting, but it kind of waxes and wanes. I need to be in a very specific mood for it to hit right. And I think before Notes from the Burning Age, I hadn't read anything like that in, I don't even know how long. Like a true like post-apocalyptic book, I haven't read one in quite a long time.
There's also the book about winter. Am I remembering
Yeah,
this
that's
correctly?
true. Road Out of Winter. Yeah.
So
no,
we have
that's true.
2 seasonal apocalypses.
But Road Out of Winter didn't feel too much like an apocalypse, because it was like pre/during apocalypse.
Okay.
You know, so it's kind of like, oh, it's just like a really horrible winter, and how do people deal with that without any sight of spring returning in the future? Notes from the Burning Age is like very explicitly shit got bad, real bad.
Yeah.
And this is what happened like generations after.
Okay.
You know, so I think like most post-apocalyptic fiction, thankfully both of these were not so depressing. You know, Road Out of Winter is more optimistic, and I liked it for that there was a lot of hope. But you know, it's a long time before I want to read something like The Road by Cormac McCarthy again. It's like I can't do that. No. So it's like a once in a blue moon type genre for me.
I know you had Premium Mohammed on to the podcast. Have you read Annual Migration of Clouds?
No, not yet.
Which is kind of post-apocalyptic.
In Alberta. Woo.
Yeah. I think it's categorized as climate fiction, which is the worst.
That's a whole genre?
That is a whole genre.
I had a podcast episode about it.
Yes, you did. And it abbreviates to cli-fi, and it's the worst.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
I hate it too. I hate it too, but it's like...
Wait, no, I love cli-fi, but I hate the concept of climate fiction.
Yeah.
Cli-fi just makes me think of sexual things, not climate fiction.
That's what makes it so good.
It's just like climate or chlamydia. I don't know.
Oh, I was thinking clitoris.
Yeah, I was thinking clitoris too.
Yeah.
Too pessimistic.
STDs. Like, oh man. But I think, climate fiction, I hate genre classifications in general.
They're always wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah. But for like the purposes of what exists already, when I'm talking about climate change, it's like, oh God, I have to put climate fiction as like a, I just have to like put them two together. But I agree with you. It's terrible. And, you know, we did an episode about young adult fiction and how YA as a genre is just shit. It's terrible, you know? It's like, oh, okay, there's borderline sex, but it's aimed at anyone from like 15 to 20, but then like,
oh, you got to shoot lower than that.
Yeah, like
we're talking like 11,
like 12 to 20, you know. But then there's like there are themes and there are expressions of sex and violence that is like YA doesn't really fit that well.
It's a really broad category.
Yeah. So I just hate genre classifications in general. And it's like, fuck this shit.
But, we got to invite you on every time we argue about what genre a book should be. Because it's every book.
As expected of us, we do some arguing.
Yeah, of course. But it's like things should just be more specific. I like how video games does it, where there's a rating and there's an explanation of what's involved. You know? And it's like books can do that too. Just like take a little bit of space on the back cover. It's fine. I don't care.
Well, that's why fan fiction is like ahead of the game, because they tag stuff so extensively. You know exactly what you're getting into.
And it's like, cool. Do I want like pirates? Yes. But do I want steampunk pirates? No. Do I want romance with my pirates? Hell yeah. But do I want like flying airships, or do I want like maritime pirates? You know, it's like you can get so freaking specific.
And even like to angst versus angst with a happy ending, which are two completely different things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, it's bullshit. It's bullshit.
Yeah. Get rid of genres, bring tags into traditional publishing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's going to make things harder on brick and mortar stores, but figure it out. I don't know. I don't have all the solutions, but just figure it out.
They can still group the books however they want.
Yeah, yeah.
But then put like a little iPad out where I can go, I'm looking for these 3 things.
Exactly.
That's the book? All right, I'll go grab it. I have one last book on my list, which I briefly mentioned with my romance garbage, which is Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell, where Song of Blood and Stone is a extremely good fantasy adventure book with romance in it. You should read Winter's Orbit if you want a romance novel. That's the whole point. It's so good. There's an incredible like space fantasy setting behind it, excellent supporting characters, wonderful tension through like the romantic plotline. But it's a romance book. It's the main focus. And I loved every second of it. And that's
I love how you emphasize book.
I read a lot of romance that's not books. I read a lot of romance that is novella fan fiction.
Like it's a real novel.
No, but it does have a lot of tropes that overlap quite a bit. You especially get the not fake relationship, but pretend
dating.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about Winter's Orbit is that it started out its life as fan fiction, I believe.
It started as fan fiction, or it started on a platform?
Okay, that's true.
Yeah.
It started its life on AO3, Archive of Our Own, which is a big fan fiction platform. But you're right, I don't think it was specifically fan fiction.
Right. Like, I would be shocked because the characters are very good, and I'm going to say original. You're not going to say no if I say original, right, Sarah?
I'm not going to say no.
Unique? I don't know.
No, it's fine. I just didn't want to be contradicted. I needed to double check myself. But the characters are thoughtful and well developed and original. I would be shocked if they had been based on a different IP.
Now I want to argue just for the sake of arguing.
You can try.
I won't. I mean, I don't have a leg to stand on because I agree with you.
It's a losing argument. Yeah, it absolutely reads like something that was from Archive of Our Own because I recognize the tropes. But that's what I love about it. There's a lot of romance on AO3, but not all of it is great. And so Winter's Orbit is, if you love the romance stuff on AO3, fanfiction, original work, or whatever, but you want something that's guaranteed good, go read Winter's Orbit. That is that book, and it is perfect for me.
I have 2 more. The first one was The Prey of Gods, which is, I would call it science fantasy, set in South Africa with really adorable robots, but also a really great look at gods and belief and compelling characters.
It felt a little bit Pratchett with
a little bit,
dealt
yeah,
with belief,
yeah,
in the best way,
in a good way. Mm-hmm. And this was one of the very first books that we read for the podcast. I'd not heard of Nikki Drayden before, who's the author, but I definitely want to read more of her work after reading this because it was just really enjoyable, and I think that she is in some kind of computer adjacent line of work.
She has to be. She has to be.
Yeah, because computers and coding and things like that formed kind of an integral part of the story, and it felt very believable in a way that I find that programming sometimes doesn't feel in novels when it's written by people who don't actually understand how programming or computers work.
Especially when you have little robots.
Yeah.
I'm going to go against everything I ever say and say that I actually think this is science fiction. Normally, I'm the first person to say, no, this is space fantasy. Like, get out of here with that. But Prey of Gods actually deals with, a technology and theoretical futures in an extremely thoughtful way, where it is also commenting on our current society. And to me, that is what science fiction is, and that is what Prey of Gods is. Also, do we need to clarify that it's Prey of Gods as in preying on something?
P-R-A-Y?
P-R-E-Y.
It's P-R-E-Y.
Yeah,
okay.
E-Y.
Changes the context.
Yeah. The double entendres that English does so well.
Yeah.
That sounds really cool. I love the idea of just like a programmer or someone who understands programming. Bringing it into a story in a believable way, but not, I imagine in such a way that it's not like, what's the word? It doesn't like break your connection with the story.
No,
like it doesn't break you out of it.
It's less technical than Crichton.
Yeah.
And he's not even an expert.
Yeah. Because that's the thing. It's like sometimes I feel too much technicality can often break you out of it.
Yeah, it's not a technical book.
But it's a consistent book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Because I'm like really on board with the idea of little robots. And South Africa as a setting.
And some fun, not specific mythology, but mythology for this world. You'd love it.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that for every book we bring up. You'd love it. Go read it.
Lily, you're just going to tell me there's mythology. Just go for it.
Hey, you know the mythology of how people exist? You'd love it.
Well, speaking of mythology, The Fall of Babel by Josiah Bancroft, which uses the sort of like framework of the Tower of Babel mythology in the Bible as an insanely successful platform for satire.
I love it already.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like the Tower of Babel exists, but instead of being a mecca for culture and language and that kind of thing, it's basically like a den of sins and humanity's worst personalities and expressions, whether it's moral expressions or physical expressions and that
That's
kind of
not
thing.
where I thought this was going to go. And I have a lot of opinions, which just makes me think I need to read the book.
It's a series.
Yeah, but like all of it, there's 4 books and this is the last one.
Okay.
And all of it plays out so in such like a dry, witty, satirical way, but with lots of heart, which is something I really appreciate. So it's like, despite the fact that there's so much representation of like sin and humanity's shittiest sides, they're all used in ways that are like sometimes jokey, sometimes serious, but always with this undertone of sort of like playfulness. And it just all comes out through Josiah Bancroft's writing. So it's like there are a lot of times where things are played for jokes, but to perfection, because it's like nothing overstays its welcome. The writing is just on point always. And all of it comes through the lens of the characters, and the characters have such distinct personalities, and the relationships that they have are so fascinating and so intriguing that I'm like, I like seeing things from one character's perspective, and then there are different POV chapters from another character's perspective, and you get different angles on the same thing. And all of it comes together in a humorous way, but such that you understand that no single person is right, because the main character, Thomas Senlin, sees things in a certain way, but he's also kind of selfish and in his quest to find his wife, who they went on their honeymoon to the Tower of Babel, and she got lost in this like crazy bustling marketplace outside of the tower. And the entire series is his quest to find her again.
The last book on my list is The World Gives Way by Marissa Levine, which is ostensibly science fiction in the sense that the backdrop is a spaceship, but it's very much a character-driven story, and the setting is really more, and I say this in a good way, but the setting is really more like set dressing, and it is the story of, it's a woman who is on the spaceship. She is essentially an indentured servant for this wealthy family, and the wealthy family learns bad news about the spaceship. The spaceship is breaking up, and it's going to break up before they arrive at their destination. The husband and wife kill themselves, and our heroine is left with the child, and she runs away, and there's like the police after her, and the story is partially about how she is running away from the police, but also partially about like coming to terms with what is happening to the spaceship and what that means for her and the society and everything that she knows. And it's this really beautiful, poignant, tragic story. Like it ends the way you expect, and that the spaceship is breaking up, and there's no, there's no Deus Ex Machina.
Technically spoilers, but I'll allow it.
It's technically spoilers, but also you know that from the back of the book that the spaceship is breaking up. Like that's fine. Not you find that out within maybe the first chapter.
Superman doesn't show up at the last minute and save everybody.
Superman doesn't show up at the last minute, and you keep hoping that something is going to happen, and there are these hints that like maybe something could, but ultimately it's this really, like I said, tragically beautiful story, which was kind of a surprise for me. I didn't think that this was going to end up being one of my favorite reads this year, and then it was.
That sounds like something I want to read at 2 a.m. when I can't sleep.
This is the kind of book that you read when you want to cry.
That's, yes, when it's 2 a.m. and I can't sleep.
Cry yourself to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's not a happy book, but it's a beautiful one.
Yeah. I actually wrote down like 5, but I think I've narrowed down like the one that I love. And because I used to hate it, like I fucking hated it. Maybe we can probably just like start.
Yeah,
now.
We should transition really quick because I feel like this is going to be great content.
Yeah. I got passion, so just like give me a good segue.
Okay, Adrian, you have to stop talking because we are going to go into our anti-pet peeve segment now. Because normally we would talk about things that bother us, but this is a look at our favorite things in the past year, and so that doesn't feel like it fits. So we're going to talk about some of our favorite things from things we've read in the past year. I'm going to use the word things a couple more times in this sentence just so that the word things no longer sounds like a word. You're welcome.
Positive things.
Adrian, what's your favorite thing?
Oh, so many things. I used to hate this, like fucking hated it with a passion. But this year, with so many of the books that I've read and like the top books that I've read, I've come to realize like dialect and jargon can work super, super well if the author does it successfully. Because before I was like, I couldn't even get past like 2 pages of some books.
I was
That's
going
so
to
perfect
say.
because that's been a pet peeve in the past.
Yeah. I have read some really, really bad dialect. Granted, it's mostly been in fan fiction, less so in published work, traditionally published or self-published or otherwise.
We read a lot of fan fiction. I don't get the impression that you read very much of it.
Yeah.
No.
Well, there's a lot of bad jargon.
And a lot of really bad dialect.
Yeah, but that also applies to like traditionally published stuff
Yes.
too. Like I've bounced off a lot. And this year, I'm specifically thinking of Ring Shout, which takes the Gullah culture in the southern United States and actually like incorporates their speech and dialect and patterns into the book. And at first it's just like, holy shit, this is really like hard to understand. But then you pick up on it through repetition and just like the context of it works so well. And then P. Jelly Clark also repeats that in A Master of Jinn, where there's a really good use of local Egyptian jargon that immerses you more deeply into the world. And I just absolutely love that because it's like I've bounced off so hard from some books in the past. And it just frustrated me to no end to be like, your fucking stupid dialect or whatever you're trying to do does not work. And it just makes me annoyed to read this character. And I can't continue. But this year, it's just like things coalesced and solidified in such a way, and then Jade Legacy with Fonda Lee actually came up with its own jargon and like colloquialisms that work within the context of the world. And through repetition, you start to understand the context and the nuance of these different things like racial slurs, honorifics, like titles that you refer to a certain person, if it's like your elder or your equal or your boss or something like that. So this little specific stuff, or like nicknames even for other people that are part of your culture, that you would just drop this nickname casually into dialogue, and all of it works. And it works because the author actually took the time and attention to incorporate it in such a way that doesn't feel jarring, but actually adds nuance and depth to the world. And it's like, now I'm super aware of it, of how it can work, and it's probably going to make me bounce hard off of anything that does it badly in the future. But I really appreciate how the books that I've read this year have managed to pull that off.
I took a linguistics class in college, and at the time, I don't know if this is now the correct phrase for it, but we had like an entire section on African American vernacular. And the stress my professor put on, like, this is a dialect. There are rules. It is consistent. Anyone who says otherwise is doing it wrong or just misunderstanding how dialects work. I really appreciated that, and I think that really makes me understand better why I hate dialect done wrong. I really think the consistency and the rule set makes the hugest difference.
Yeah, and through repetition, that consistency allows you to pick up on what's being said. And when you see it over and over again, even in Ring Shout, even though it's like a novella, these things come up again and again in such a way where you start to pick up, like, with Gullah dialect in particular, it's like a fucking crazy jumble of words when you first look at it. But once you start to piece it together, you realize, like, no, this is just like a really specific twist on English. And you just have to pick up on, like, you have to speak it out loud in order to understand it,
Well, I frankly felt that way with the Iliad too.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you read Beowulf.
Yeah.
You read even Shakespeare. Like, you're not going to get Shakespeare. You're not going to get into it. You're not going to get immersed into it until you understand the dialect through repetition, but also like occasionally just like speaking it out loud. That's why Shakespeare in theater live spoken is so much more powerful than just reading it on a page.
language is spoken. It's not purely written, and it makes such
Yeah.
a huge difference.
Yeah. Especially in oral cultures and oral traditions like the Gullah, you know. And it really works if the author has the intention of enhancing their world and enhancing the immersion through the use of this, as opposed to just like a gimmick, which is probably why a lot of the times it just falls flat and pisses people off and causes readers like me to just put the book away and never want to touch it again. This is like, no, this is not interesting. It doesn't do anything for me.
Part of it is about the storytelling method too. I know sometimes when I'm reading poetry, I'm usually in the same room as my husband, and I say, hey, I have to read this out loud now. In order for me to understand this, I need to read it out loud. So you're going to get a poetry recitation.
Yeah.
But it completely changes, or at least for me, it makes it so much easier to really comprehend the words when it's such a language-driven format.
And it's not even just that. It's like any writing ever, you know, with my own writing since I started doing writing critique sessions with a friend of mine and reading this stuff out loud to him, I can hear the rhythm of what I've written. And sometimes I'm just like thrown off by my own writing, thinking like, fuck, I just hit this like weird little hurdle in my rhythm based on how I wrote it on the page. And so I have to like make a note, like I got to change that because it doesn't work. If it doesn't flow while I'm speaking, it's not going to flow while somebody's reading, right?
Sarah, have you ever read something out loud to yourself?
I don't read out loud to myself, no.
What about to the pugs, though?
No, I don't generally read out loud to the pugs.
Why not? I bet they'd like it.
Yeah, but I mean, why bother? I can if I can read to myself in my head, why should I expend the energy to read out loud to them?
To enjoy the language.
I can do that in my head just as well. But
then my throat gets dry.
Yeah. This conversation, it does make me think of Inda, though. Not so much from a language perspective or a dialect perspective, but from a jargon perspective, because I think one of the complaints that people have about Inda is that there's too much jargon in the beginning and people get lost. And I think that's valid. Like
Inda by Sherwood Smith.
Inda by Sherwood Smith, yes. And I think that's valid. There is a lot of titles and honorifics that she uses in the series and doesn't describe immediately, or I mean, you're kind of thrown in the deep end. And for me personally, that works because all of this, she has thought very deeply about the culture and the community that this is all part of. And so for me, it feels very much part of the world and like a thoughtful inclusion and not something that's just added on as set dressing. But I can see why it would take some people, out of the story, because it is in the very beginning when you're not familiar with these characters and you're not familiar with these terms, it can be a lot. So that's what this conversation makes me think of.
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of cyberpunk, and that is dense with jargon all the time. But cyberpunk is like so heavy on jargon. I think it like relies on jargon as a world building mechanism.
But it partially uses it to alienate the reader on purpose.
Yeah.
To other the world. Like that's part of the point, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It's like to create a purposeful distance between you and the world, to give you a sense that it's like, this is familiar, but it's unfamiliar at the same time. And so this kind of like duality of discomfort and not knowing what's going on or what these things are specifically, and the curiosity that comes with wanting to, if you're the type of reader that likes that, wanting to invest in that world and learn more about what's going on. And hopefully through the context of the story and the characters, you learn what those things are and do and how they function.
Well, that's good cyberpunk versus bad cyberpunk.
Shitty cyberpunk. I don't think there's like middle ground cyberpunk, to be honest.
Yeah, no.
It's like it's good or it's terrible.
But are we biased because we like the genre?
You could say that about any genre, really.
Yeah, fair.
But I think cyberpunk is one of those unique genres that has a lot of very, very good stalwarts that have been definitive of what the genre is. And the good cyberpunk doesn't copy that. The bad cyberpunk tends to try, whether consciously or unconsciously, to replicate the successes within the genre.
Well, isn't that a function of science fiction? The genre is exploring new concepts. And so any science fiction story that is just redoing something that already happened is by definition not science fiction anymore.
True.
I would argue.
It's like, you're not even trying. Come up with some new shit.
You're missing the point.
Exactly. At this point, it's just science.
Or space fantasy.
Exactly.
My trope is not nearly as thoughtful as yours. I am going to talk about the damsel in distress. And I am gonna stop talking there because I cannot talk about Mexican Gothic, because you should just go read the book because it's very, very good and I don't want to spoil anything. But the main premise of the book is the main character's cousin has been married into a bad situation and is writing letters back to her family, and so the main character is sent to go investigate, like make sure everything's okay. The patriarch has sent the main character to advocate for the cousin, and it is just off the bat, the damsel in distress is being taken care of by another woman, just as automatically putting that trope on its head. And this book also deals with that trope in other interesting ways, which I will not talk about.
Spoilers.
Exactly. Don't go listen to our episode on it, because that will spoil it. Go read the book. And then listen to our episode.
Then go listen to our episode. My trope is even less well thought out as the two of you. It's just that there is only one bed. And there were a couple of books that we read where there is only one bed, and I loved them.
Bed! I already talked about it feels bad. Okay. I feel bad calling a thing trashy romance, because to me it's, I should say guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
That's what I should say. It's not trashy,
nice
it's guilty pleasure. It's different. But there was only one bed is like the ultimate romantic tension guilty pleasure.
I just think that's like the start of a porn, is like, oh no, there's only one bed. Whatever will I do?
I mean, that's the appeal.
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
And then it's like, oh, we're next to each other. Is that your boner? Just like gently brushing my thigh.
You're acting like you're making a joke, but you have just like rewritten basically everything.
Like that is why that is a great trope. Granted, that particular scenario doesn't quite play out in either of the two books that I was thinking about that have this trope.
But that's why they're well done. They're playing on the trope.
Yeah.
I haven't actually read them, but I know.
Well, no, I mean, you've read one of them, because one of them is Winter's Orbit.
Oh,
where there is only one bed.
But that's because it's also the fake relationship, and so they have to pretend to be in a relationship, so they have to sleep in the same bed, and so there's a lot of tension.
Well, I was thinking when they get stuck,
pillow tension
in the tent.
Also, only one bed.
Also, only one bed.
Or like one air mattress.
They're not in a legitimate relationship at that point.
No. But that's not related to their fake dating.
But it's the tension between these characters are currently in one relationship setting or whatever.
Fake relationship.
Versus they're being put in this situation which is far more intimate than their actual relationship justifies. And in real life, that is only stressful and awkward. But in a romance novel, it's great.
It's sexy.
Yes.
Yeah, and then the other scenario that I was thinking of is the second Phoenix Feather book by Sherwood Smith.
But it's so absurd because any real person in this situation, it's a non-issue.
Mm-hmm.
But in this fantasy realm, and I use the word fantasy not as in the genre, but as in the like extremely unrealistic,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes sexy, and that's fun.
I mean, I would argue that it's not necessarily sexy specifically. Like, I don't think the Phoenix Feather is a sexy situation.
Well, I haven't read that one, but
Yeah,
okay.
but there is romantic tension underlying it. So it's not like an we're gonna have sex now situation, but it's I'm sharing a bed with someone that I didn't realize I had feelings for, and maybe I do have feelings for them, and then in the morning there's a cliffhanger, and I will not say more.
Is that the end of the book? That is horrible.
That is very close to the end of the book.
What the fuck?
In the morning, there's a cliffhanger. That's.
I don't want to read it now.
Oh, but it's so good. You have to. It's so good.
Only
It's
one
so
bed
good.
cliffhanger.
No, but it's so good. Oh man. You have to read it. Lily, you have to read it.
Is it the two characters I think it is?
Yes.
Good. Okay, I'm on board. I'm back on board. Just kidding. I think we covered all the content I had plans for. Is there anything else someone was like burning need to say?
Just that this was a really good year of reading, honestly.
Yeah.
I agree, but I'm extremely biased because I read more this year than I have for a very long time.
Yeah, me too. But I feel like, as opposed to you two, where you're reading a lot of stuff for the podcast under Sarah's iron grip. But I feel like a lot of the stuff that I read this year is like, I really wanted to read it, or I really wanted to interview the author. And so I read their stuff in order to prepare to interview them. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like two birds with one stone. So in the end, it's like, I'm just unbelievably satisfied with everything that majority, I'd say there's like two or three that were kind of like, but majority of the stuff that I picked up this year was good, great, or amazing.
I mentioned this in your episode, the SFF Addicts 2022 something. I don't actually know the name of it.
What we're excited to read in 2022.
That's the one. It'll be out before we do this one, but it's hard because we recorded them in the same day. Even if I read a book that I don't like, I still enjoy the act of reading it. Mm-hmm. I'm easy to please. The authors won't like it because I hate reading it, but it's something that Connor said. He takes a lot of time to read books because he's looking at how they work and how they work well. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that I do. When I hate a book, I spend time thinking about why do I hate this and how could I fix it? Mm-hmm. And so it's fine.
When I hate a book, I just think, man, I hate this and I want to throw this book against the wall.
It can be both.
I'm very much like you, Lily, where it's like I try to make the best out of a bad situation, I guess. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, even if this is not satisfying me, I can still take lessons from it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's as a reader or a writer or podcasting, like interviewing authors and stuff like that. I feel like there's a lot that I can glean from shitty stuff, because it's like, why is it shitty? Subjectively, from my perspective at least. And like you say, what can I do? What could I do to make it better? You know?
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Twitter and Instagram at FictionFansPod. And you can find Adrian at SFF Addicts Pod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
We will also link to that Twitter handle in the description because it is very hard to understand, in my opinion.
There are a number of F's in there.
That's literally the letter that is the hardest to hear, phonetically.
SFF Addicts.
Yeah. SFS Addicts? Okay.
S&M Addicts? I don't know.
I think that might be the case. But if you did enjoy our episode, please rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts. And also follow us wherever your podcasts live.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated.
Bye.
Bye.